Hey Gator fans, the Florida Gators are back on the road tonight in Athens at 7 o'clock on ESPN2/ESPNU to face their former coach again, Mike White and the Georgia Bulldogs. The Florida-Georgia rivalry has heated up over the last couple of years on the basketball court. Mike White obviously leaving Florida to go coach at UGA, and Florida hiring Todd Golden, who has dominated the Georgia matchup. I think he's now 6-1 or 7-1 against Mike White and the Bulldogs because they played in the SEC tournament game. Georgia, as their fans have reminded us, was the last team to beat Florida in the regular season before Florida ran the table, plowing through the SEC tournament and March Madness tournament. So Florida will be looking to get revenge tonight against Georgia for that road loss last year. And not only is it revenge for beating Florida in Athens last year, but it's also a personal revenge for what the fans were saying about their coach last year. Obviously, there was allegations regarding Todd Golden that were not proven to be true. By the way, let me just make sure that's clear. And the Georgia fans really didn't care because they're Georgia fans and it's Florida. They called Mike White a pedophile throughout the game as it was being played. Certainly when they were up big in the first half, Florida almost mounted a massive comeback, but Georgia held on long enough just to win the game. And I'm sure that has been stuck on the minds of a Thomas Hogg, of a Ruben Chunilu, of an Alex Condon, and any player that's returning to this team that was on the team last year. I'm sure they haven't forgotten that. I know Todd Golden probably hasn't forgotten that. So I'm pretty sure they would want to, what they did to Alabama and Texas A&M, they would love to do to Georgia tonight and just pound them into the dirt, metaphorically speaking, for the stuff they said about Todd Golden last year. But either way, we're gonna preview this matchup. We're gonna look into what's heading into this matchup. So the Florida Gators and Georgia are gonna meet for the 132nd time on a basketball court. Florida leads the series 127 to 104, and really, for a long time, Georgia and Florida were the doormats of SEC basketball. I mean, granted, Kentucky is really the only, as they like to say, unparalleled tradition in SEC men hoops. And Florida and Georgia were constantly known as like an afterthought. Georgia made the first Final Four between the two in the late, I think it was like 1987 or 1983. It was in the 80s. I know that for certain. And then Florida obviously made the first Final Four in the 90s. And then when the 2000s came along, they skyrocketed up the ranks of college basketball, and they're back at it again with Todd Golden. So I'm pretty sure for a long time this matchup was probably a little bit more even match in terms of the win-loss record. But what Florida has done this century has probably boosted them way above Georgia. So they met in January 6th, in the O Dome, or the O'Connell Center, the Exactech Arena, behind Thomas Hogg, who had a big game, 21 points, 12 rebounds, 5 assists, and Georgia was coming in on a 7-game win streak, and Florida, along with Alex Condon's 21 points and 8 rebounds, just came in and just dominated in the second half because Florida only led by 1 point at halftime, but then they just destroyed Georgia that entire second half and went and outscored them 51 to 37 point wise in the second half. Sorry, my neighbors are making noise above. That's what distracted me for a moment. So here's the setup. Georgia and Florida are going to meet for the second time this year. I've already talked about their first game this past January. UF is playing outstanding basketball, having won 3 straight blowouts, including 2 on the road against Saturday's 86 to 67 victory over Texas A&M, and then the previous game the week prior was Alabama on that Sunday afternoon game, 100 to 77. Georgia just broke a 3-game losing streak, winning 83 to 71 at LSU. Florida also beat LSU earlier this year, 75 to 61. UF is now ranked 14th in the Associated Press top 20 5. And now the Georgia Bulldogs are tied with Auburn for 9th place in the SEC. So the chances of them winning the SEC regular season title is pretty much up in smoke. But they still have hopes to make an NCAA tournament. And maybe this time they'll actually win a game and not get blown out like they did last year. Todd Golden is 7-1 against UF's predecessor. Yep, just like I knew. Tail of the tape. Scoring, Georgia scores 91 points a game. Florida scores 86. They're both right next to each other in field goal percentage. Georgia 47%, Florida 46.9. Georgia a little bit better in the three-point range. But in terms of defense, Florida is way better. Florida has the second best scoring defense in the SEC. So pretty obvious who's the more complete team there. Overall strength of schedule ranking, Florida blows Georgia out the water. Arizona, UConn, Duke, Miami, who got a nice win over North Carolina. So that win over Miami is aging like wine, like fine wine for the Florida Gators. So their overall strength of schedule is like far and ahead above Georgia's strength of schedule. Tonight they're going to play. Here it is. I got another article pulled up by the Alligator talking about Florida's maintaining a defensive dominance against Georgia tonight. So since Florida lost to Auburn at home on January 24th, Florida has held each opponent under their scoring averages. And I've already talked about how they're second in the conference in points allowed. Recent defensive success started against South Carolina when they just tore up. That was the first game they played after the Auburn loss. Florida went on the road and got the largest road victory in program history, beating South Carolina by almost 50 points. I think it was like 47 points that they won that game. South Carolina entered the game with averaging 78.3 points per game, and the Florida defense didn't even allow them to get to 50. I think, it was a 95-48 victory. It was just bad for the Gamecocks that night. And then you have the game against Alabama. They were averaging 92 points per game, and Florida only allowed 77. So that was that's way down from their average. They talked about Boogie Flynn, how he had 8 steals, which tied a program record set by Clifford Lett. And in the first half, Boogie also had 2 steal and slam sequences. I guess he stole the ball and got on fast break and dunked it. It was a very masterful performance. And then recently, the Aggies came in shooting an SEC best 37.6 from beyond the arc and ranked second in scoring offense, averaging like Alabama did 92 points per game. And Florida didn't even let Texas A&M get into the 70s. So as impressive as their defense was against Alabama, it was even more impressive against Texas A&M. So now here comes the Bulldogs again. They're back to averaging 91.9 points per game, and it seems like they've gotten a little bit of their mojo back. Jeremiah Wilkinson, who's their best scorer in this game, he's out. He's not going to be playing in this game. So going up against one of the top 2 defenses in the conference without your best scorer, that's not good if you're a Georgia fan. You have Blue Kane, who averages 13.2 points per game. He's going to take the leading role, but against the Gators, he was limited to 8 points on 3 of 9 of shooting. So it's going to be a tough matchup for Georgia. I said this before when I did my video, which was forecasting Florida's finish of the season. I expected Florida to win at least 7 of their 10 games. I said Texas, South Carolina, because you had already beaten them down once, and the 2 Mississippi schools. That was 4 right there. I expected you to get a victory on the road at Georgia, because I knew deep down because it's obvious Florida's a way better basketball team than Georgia. So their performances against Alabama, Texas A&M has further sold me that. I already knew it beforehand, but now I'm just I have even less concern of Georgia, especially now that their leading scorer is out. So Florida should beat Georgia with no problem. There's no excuse for Florida to lose tonight on the road at Georgia. If you can dominate Alabama and Texas A&M, who are better than Georgia in the fashion that you did, and Georgia not having their best player, it should be no problem for you to secure a victory there. And it's important that you win this game because it'll help you maintain sole possession of that first spot in the SEC standings, because this upcoming Saturday, you're going to be on Valentine's Day, you're going to be hosting Kentucky in a big matchup. And if Kentucky beats you, I think not only are they going to be not only they're going to have the same record as you SEC wise, but they're going to have the head-to-head tiebreaker until you face them again in March. So it's with a big game coming up against Kentucky on Saturday, it's real easy to let this road matchup with Athens be what they call a trap game. But I don't expect that. I expect Florida to win the game. I don't really do basketball scores predictions because they're a lot more harder to predict than football scores. But if you twist my arm behind my back, I'll give Georgia the benefit of the doubt, and I'll say 92-83 in victory of Florida. I'll give Georgia like a little bit of a game. They might not dominate them, but I'll give Georgia the benefit of the doubt and say that they'll be a little bit more competitive this time. 92-83, that's my prediction for tonight's game.